Hello and welcome once again to Bulldogs Unleashed, our inside look at the club and the game, brought to you by Reclaim the Game. Got a big list this week. We've got two greats from the late 80s, early 90s, Joey Thomas and David Gillespie coming in to talk about the dog days. Joe also a board member, of course, of the Canterbury-Bankstown Rugby League Club. Our regular look at team news and what's happening around the club with Luke Goodwin. G'day, mate.
G'day, mate.
And we've got a special guest coming in today too. Maria Souris will join us. She's representing the Jenny Souris Foundation, and we're dedicating this weekend's home game against the Warriors to the Jenny Souris Foundation, which is a terrific gesture, mate.
Yeah, it is. It's our third time that we'll be doing this. It's great. Jenny, for people that don't know, fought a long battle, 10-year battle with cancer, passed away sadly in 2020, and the Souris family through M&J Chickens have been a part of our club and a part of the Bulldogs family for over 20 years. So that's the least we could do is to support one of our own. And obviously I won't say much more about it and let you guys talk about it a bit later.
It is a remarkable story. Maria will have the details on that. And if you haven't caught up with it before, as Luke said, it's quite an unusual combination of fan, sponsor and footy club. You don't see that all too often. I mean, a lot of times it's all business, but this is a very personal story. That's coming up on Unleashed. Now, in terms of the team list this week, not a lot of change, Luke, but we've got this situation, and I think Cameron Ciraldo referred to this in an earlier post-match interview this season. And look, all clubs deal with this. There are players managing injuries, let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's ongoing week by week. We've had some long-term injuries, and we've got some guys hopefully coming back in the next couple of weeks, which is great. They're still, preparing, they're back to full training, preparing to take the field if it's New South Wales Cup or back into first grade. Obviously, that's up to the coaches and the coaching staff. But, yeah, it's a bit exciting. We're getting around that time now, round 12, round 13, 14, where we're going to get some, quality back, which is great.
It makes it tough to manage your list, and you see it in English football a lot because they play a lot of competitions at once. Yep. The big clubs do anyway, and they rotate players. If you've got a big injury list, that's not easy to do. You can't you can't shift players if you think they're not doing well in a certain position. We've already had a major positional change this year, but that arguably brought Carl Oluwapu up to first grade maybe a little earlier than Cameron Ciraldo had expected, but perhaps we just don't have a lot of room to move.
No, you don't. In the salary cap, you always – that's always that's why the salary cap's in place. That's why you got to manage your roster and your depth at that. And I think Gus and Cam are doing a great job at that. But, yeah, it is tough. But, next man up mentality. That's what it's always about. We all got our own opportunity. You can speak to Joe and Cement later. We all got our opportunity due to injury. So it's not great, but it is tough. And like I said, we've unearthed a couple of young players like young Jacob Preston. I think it's been our best all year. Been given opportunity. Carl has been outstanding. His last two inputs into the game. So yeah, that might have come a bit earlier than we would have liked, but they've been great.
And there's also, from a welfare point of view, and this is your specialty in the club, is managing existing injuries, and you don't want to force a player to play when they still have a niggle. But sometimes that has to be balanced.
Yeah, it does. Most clubs do it. So the important thing about a player, especially with long-term injury, like Bailey Biondioto has been, Luke Thompson, Chrissy Patolo, the biggest thing with them is keeping them connected to the team. So we bring them in. They have rehab earlier than training starts with our main squad, but we make sure they train, beside the main squad on the field, in the gym, so they still feel part of the squad. So it's so easily to be forgotten and left behind sometimes, and you don't mean to do it. I know in my day it was just, you do your best and you didn't feel a part of it at all.
Right. So,
part of that and their mental health is, we keep them connected with the team. So, and like I said, most clubs do that now and they do it well.
Let's look at the game last weekend, even though it's not pretty in a lot of ways. And I say that because it's not often both coaches actually come out and say the score flattered the losing side. That's exactly what happened. Ricky Stewart and Cameron Ciraldo in agreement on that. Now, the losing coach will often, try and paint as good a picture as he can or she can on the result of a game. But Cameron Ciraldo has been very frank with the public and the fans this year, I think. I can't imagine any fan suggesting that Cameron Ciraldo has hidden anything from them this year. It's been a very blunt appraisal of the performance. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's funny, Bill. We've spoken about it at length over the last couple of days, but we were down after 50 seconds. And then the next 79 minutes, we won the game. It's not often that you could say that happens. So when you look
and 3 tries in 6 minutes again, that little period where they just got a lot of points.
No, and I agree. The score did flatter us. I'm sure, when there was a pass there with the Raiders, it hit him on the head. They ran away and scored. Should have been a try.
Well, they could have scored 2 more, really.
Yeah, definitely. So but you can look at it. We did well to hustle and grind and stay in the match. We did do that. But, we were just holding on. It wasn't one of our greatest performances, especially from the week before. I think that was a bit disappointing that we really ground out a great win against the Dragons. It was ugly, but, we got there. It
was a bit like the Cowboys result, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the same. We just held in there. And then this week, we weren't at our best. We need to find out why. We need to go and reassess and work out why, what changed from last week to this week. So I know the boys have done a lot of work on that. There's been, you could say some soul searching. And that's all of us, everyone involved. So, it's a bit tough.
And that mentality side of thing is a big part of your job. So we talk about different statistical things being the result of a new team coming together. You got young players, you got players who haven't played together before coming in from different clubs, all those things. But one thing we don't often look at is the week-to-week consistency, the big picture. And that's another thing. There's inconsistency on the field within games, and certain things manifest itself from that. But not being able to put in consistent performances week in, week out is another sort of symptom, isn't it, really, of a developing team?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And like I said, it's a whole new squad, new coaching staff. We're still finding our feet and how, what Travis, our high performance, manager wants from us, and and obviously the different principles and values that stuff the coaches instilled. So, we're not far off. It is work in progress. We always sort of knew it would be when a whole new different organisation, gets changed like we did. Things will take a bit of time. There will be teething problems, but I'm sure the fans and even us, it feels a lot different and it seems a lot better. So things are working because it feels, from where we've been the last couple of years, it's totally different.
You can see it. And look, we've seen it with other clubs in the last couple of seasons in what have been really close competitions. We had a couple of years there where it was a few teams are fairly dominant. The last season, particularly this, and I'll talk about that in a minute, has been remarkably consistently inconsistent, but, which is good news for the teams that are down the bottom of the ladder.
Well, you look, Billy, you look at it now, like all the teams at Magic Round, so all the teams who are meant to win, the Roosters got beat, the Sharks got beat, the Eels. So, when you look at that, if you turn up on the day and you're ready to play, you'll win. Yep. If you want it more than the other team, and that's, everyone's beating everyone at the moment. So it's a real, obviously apart from the Broncos at the top, it's pretty congested. Yeah,
and if it clicks, you can string some wins together, have a big impact on the ladder. Okay, let's look at Reid Marnie leading the tackle. This is an interesting stat, this. He leads the tackle count in the NRL with 451, averaging 45 a game, but he's also leading the missed tackle count. Now, that actually ties in with another very interesting sporting statistic, and that is shooters in basketball. I'm talking not under the basket here, I'm talking outside shooters in basketball. They very often have a massive scoring rate, but if you look at their stats, they miss a lot of shots too. And so basically it's the more tackles you attempt, the more you are likely to miss, isn't it?
Well, that's inevitable. That's it's proven, and that's how it is. And there could be other. I'm sure there's other aspects there. Us, not completing our sets and having to make more tackles than other teams. So, there's some other, areas you need to look at. But yeah, for sure, if you're making more tackles, the higher you're going to miss some. Yeah.
Do you then give him more help? Is that part of the issue? When Cam Ciraldo said too many people not doing their job, Reid actually said the same thing in the post-match news conference. I'm not suggesting they were saying that, but is that all part of what they're trying to say there in terms of the little things?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But, like I said previously, everyone's got a job to do. They know the job. But also, like on the flip side, part of that job's to hold the ball and complete sets. And if we're not doing that, we're going to make more tackles.
It was an issue on the weekend, yeah. There's no doubt about that. On the plus side, there's some really nice stats coming out. And here are guys that you wouldn't normally, well, some of them anyway, you wouldn't normally see in the headlines in the NRL week to week because they're still very early in their careers. But Perham, Waddell, King, Avarillo and Pangai Jr. all averaging more than 100 running metres a match. That's encouraging.
Yeah, it is. It is really good. So we've got to match that up with a bit of good D. Corey Waddell, I think, has been outstanding for us all year. I think he's been a mainstay of our team. He's playing 80 minutes. He's playing on an edge. He plays, in the middle. He's been great. He's been really good for us. Good to see Tavita back doing what he does best, damaging opposition. So, he'll only be better for the run. And then, Hayes at the back and Jake. I think Jake's been our best back all year. He's been outstanding.
I'm laughing because the media's been running stories about, will he leave the club? As soon as anyone has a good game in any club, they're up for grabs, particularly if their contract's up. But anyway, that's above both our pay grades, I think, that story. But anyway, the other thing too is post-contact meters. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't very flattering for the side. I guess putting a player like Horsburgh on the ground wasn't easy on Friday. I don't know if anyone could have stopped him.
But he was good, I must admit. And there was...
He played well for us. Remember, briefly stepped in for us
a couple of years games
back.
Last year during 2 years ago during COVID. But, in the first set of 6, he just kept pumping the legs. He made an extra 15 metres after contact then. It was like, wow. Yeah.
That does inflate their stats. I think he single-handedly did that, actually.
He did.
But all their forwards played well. And bear in mind, we have a lot of forwards still sitting on the bench. That can't be overlooked. It's important.
You're right. No, there's Thompson there. We also got Ryan Sutton. He's,
Kick-out.
Yeah, kicks. So, we've got a fair pack waiting to, join them.
Warriors have now won 5 in a row against the Bulldogs because we did play them early in the season. Very close game, that one, in New Zealand. Yeah. So we're back home. But I don't know, they seem to me to be even better now than they were when we last played them. So it's going to be a tough game on the weekend.
Yeah, they have improved. I'd like to think we've gotten better too. But, that was a tough game over there. It was a tough loss. We thought we would win going over there, not overconfident, but we just knew what we'd put in during the pre-season when we were ready to play. And, a couple of things didn't happen for us. And, it was a tough one to take. So, we know, how we've played them already. We know what we need to do. And we know, we need to get back up for this one. Let last week go. We're already over it. We're preparing already.
I suppose you could say they've reshuffled their side a little bit, certainly not as much as the Bulldogs have. So I think there's a lot more room for improvement, it's fair to say, in our club than theirs at this stage.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, we've had probably the biggest injury toll in the league, hopefully getting a few back. And like people like Carraz, he'll be better for the run again. Tavita's just, he's getting better every week with the game time he's getting. So, I love it at the moment. It's pretty exciting, and Friday night it's going to be great out of the call.
And look, as you mentioned, Corey Waddell there earlier, there's a lot of role players in the team who obviously haven't had that opportunity in the last couple of years. But now with different players around them, you can see their potential. It's really good. I'm so pleased for some of those guys because they've done it tough.
Oh, yeah. We've been in it hasn't been great, the club, the last, 4 to 5 years. We haven't played semis. So, and, there's people that have been here all that time. And you could probably say, forgotten how to win. Now mix it in with Cam and our new staff and these new players, winners like, your Addo Cars and your Burtons, Maxi Kings and stuff. So they know what it takes to win and how to build a club of winners. So, like I said, it's the club is definitely on the up and it's pretty exciting where we're headed.
Well, Luke, thanks for joining us this week, mate. We'll do it all again next week.
My pleasure, mate.
Coming up on Bulldogs Unleashed, don't forget David Gillespie will be dropping in, but in the short term, Joey Thomas will come in. He'll be a board member hat on this week because we'll be talking to Maria Souris about the great Jenny Souris Foundation that we're commemorating this weekend.
My name's Braden Burns and I play for the Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs. I love playing footy because obviously I've played it since I was a kid. Yeah, the fans are obviously really important to every footy player. We go out and we play for the fans and the members especially. You hear the fans obviously when they're giving it to you on the sideline. As a young kid I was pretty easily influenced and I sort of got into gambling a little bit, not too bad, but I guess it just takes away from the game. You don't sort of sit there and watch the game for what it is and enjoy those special moments and sort of support your team. You're more worried about your multis. Yeah, I'm really proud that the Bulldogs as a partner would reclaim the game. I'm someone who's sort of gotten off betting. I'm really proud to say that that's something that I'm sort of walked away from and I'm proud to be a part of it. Don't let a bet take you away from the match. Reclaim the game. Be gamble aware.
This week's headlines.
Welcome back to Bulldogs Unleashed, where we introduce two special guests today. One who's going to tell us a lot of yarns later on was Cement Gillespie, Joe Thomas, who's Bulldogs board member as well. G'day, Joe.
Good to be here, Bill.
And our very special guest for this week, who I know you're pleased to have with us today, is Maria Souris, representing the Jenny Souris Foundation, who's closely connected with our game this weekend against the Warriors. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Well, Maria, firstly, it's quite a story. The M&J Chickens, your mum, and the Bulldogs. It goes back a long way.
It goes back a very long way. Mum's been a Bulldogs supporter since she was a child, basically. Back then, the Bulldogs weren't called the Bulldogs; they were called the Berries.
I remember.
So yeah, she was a supporter for a very, very long time, and then through the business, through M&J Chickens, there came an opportunity to become a sponsor, and Mum was all guns blazing. Dad was just the silent, obedient one, and they agreed, and it's been a beautiful, blossoming relationship ever since.
And Joe, as a board member, it's not often. Sponsorship's very much a business thing for a lot of companies. It's not often you get a fan who gets involved in the game in that way.
No, it's a real it's a difference really when you look at it, and we're so happy that they've been on board. I remember meeting Maria Jenny 20 years ago, and they've been with the club for such a long time. It's been a great sponsorship that they've brought to the club, and we've all got on really well over a long period of time. And your mum's been a tremendous attribute, even though that she might not have been at the front line, but she was always behind the scenes pushing the sponsorship. I'd like to hear more about how your family got involved with the club and moved into becoming a very good sponsor.
Yeah, so we started off just sort of supplying chicken to Canterbury leagues, and then I can't remember exactly who it was, but somebody sort of reached out and said, look, would you guys be interested in becoming a sponsor? And we were sort of like, oh, isn't that for the big guys? We're just a little chicken company, you know? And then the opportunity presented itself, and we were on board, and it was a sort of an opportunity for us to be involved not only as sponsors but as supporter sponsors that, you know, the average person doesn't always get. So it was a really nice way for us to connect with the Bulldogs and with the game. And even now, you know, our children seeing M&J Chickens, seeing the Jenny Souris Foundation on the jersey, it makes a really big difference.
And my memories of your mum too are not necessarily sipping champagne in the corporate. She was out in the stands with all the other fans.
Yeah, probably one of the noisiest ones too.
And that's what it's all about. And now, look, of course, we're here essentially because of tragedy too. Your mum had a 10-year battle with cancer, and of course that affected everyone, including the club.
Yeah, it affected everybody that loved her and everybody that was involved with her in one way, shape or form. When she first got diagnosed with breast cancer, we kind of didn't make it public knowledge. And Mum was the sort of person that suffered in silence. She didn't tell anybody. She didn't, make a big deal out of it. But the people that did know her and did see her through that time, it's really ironic because even at her sickest point, she'd come home from sort of having a round of chemotherapy and be in tears. And you'd be like, well, Mum, what's wrong? You know, you're feeling unwell. And she'd be like, it breaks my heart to think that there are people out there that can't have the sort of experience that I'm having and, you know, the access to the type of treatment that I'm having. And, you know, to hear that so humbly from a person who's suffering so much, it really puts things into perspective about the type of person that she was. And that's the reason we're here today.
And that's the thing that really struck me most about the Jenny Souris Foundation and the whole relationship, is that your mum's thoughts right to the end were with other people. And I guess that's what prompted the family to say, hey, let's turn that memory into something else.
Yeah. Look, mum was in remission for 10 years. And then when the cancer returned, it returned with a vengeance. So it was sudden and everything sort of happened really quickly. And it actually, her last few months were right in the middle of COVID. So nobody could see her. We, if she was to be in hospital, we wouldn't have been able to be with her. So we opted to have home care. And even that comes at a significant cost. So after all the dust had settled and we had had time to heal and all the rest of it, we just sort of thought everybody was reaching out and saying, you know, look, we couldn't be at Mum's funeral. How can we help you guys? How can we support you guys? And we obviously didn't need funds. There was, you know, you can't mend a broken heart. But what we decided to do was give other people the opportunity to have the type of experience that we had. And it came to light with the idea of people being able to have home care, the idea of being able to give funding to people that potentially could be missing out on treatment and things like that. So that's the idea behind the foundation, and that's the direction we want to go in, and just help as many people as possible and just ease the burden that comes with sickness. You know, finances shouldn't be something that you need to worry about when you're sick. You should be just focused on being well.
And it was a nice touch. I remember it's a bit over a year now since the foundation was launched, isn't it?
Yeah,
it was kind of like a family thing with the club being involved as well,
Yeah.
wasn't it? After that, as you said, Joe, that long association, I guess it was just a logical process.
Yeah, it was.
And now, Maria, what have you been doing in the last year? Because it's not easy to get a charity up and running. You've got to
Yeah.
evaluate things. There are lots of processes involved. How's it been going?
Look, it's been a very big learning experience for us. We never sort of engaged in this type of activity before, apart from donating and things like that. We've never been on the other end to see how the mechanics work and things like that. But it's definitely been a learning curve. We've come to hear many stories, all of which I won't bore you with right now, but we've been privileged and lucky enough to be able to support 2 families so far, which is very exciting. One of them is a young father who is dealing with sort of stage 4 cancer, which for him is terminal. But his diagnosis came in 2021. We assisted him to get to a medical facility in Mexico who offer alternative treatments, because at his stage, conventional medicine was no longer an option. And we helped get him to Mexico. We're now in 2023. He's still around, still battling, still walking around with a big smile on his face, and he still has time with his children and his family, and we were really lucky to be a part of that. So that's one story. Then we've got the young Angelina, who is suffering with Lafora disease. Many people may not be familiar with Lafora disease, but it's a very rare disease, and it's in layman's terms, it's a childhood dementia. It's a form of childhood dementia, and its side effects include seizures and things like that. So when we first met with Ange and her mum Nikki, Ange couldn't even walk. She was suffering with severe seizures, and I think it plays a part on the brain as well. So in a nutshell, we were able to provide, through our last gala event, 12 months worth of a trial medication that is only available in the US. So her mum, Angie's mum, Nikki, managed to source the drugs, and we were able to fund 12 months of medicine for Ange. So, she's now able to walk. She danced for the first time recently, which hasn't happened in many, many years. So stories like that give you hope.
And as you say, these are pathways that just wouldn't be available to them under normal circumstances, which your mum saw during her treatment, obviously.
Precisely, yes.
Game day partnership rights are shared with the Jenny Souris Foundation on the weekend. And Joe, I know we use this word a lot when it comes to days like this, but it gives the game a bit of perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. It sort of puts it in its place. And I think it was interesting to hear, is your foundation for everyone, for anyone that's in trouble, or is it more cancer, or is it...
Look, we're trying to move towards people that are suffering with life-threatening illnesses, not because not everybody needs help, but our theory is around giving people more time. If you speak to anybody that has got someone who's sick or has lost someone they love, all you want is more time and more good time, not just, sick time and struggling time. You want good times, and that's what we're about, just trying to give hope to those that don't have hope.
So how are you raising your funds for the foundation?
Yeah, we're you can donate via our website or our Instagram or our Facebook and things like that, but our last gala event was a huge success, and that came through basically our circles, the Bulldogs, M&J Chickens. We've got a number of supporters through our years in business that came along and supported us. And like I said, after Mum passed, the abundance of people that tried to reach out that couldn't attend a funeral, couldn't come and see Mum when she was, nearing the end, and everybody just wanted to do something. And this was our way of helping everybody else do something too, something that would benefit the masses, not just one person.
Well, it's not much to ask, but a big game on the weekend. Get there, and by doing so, you're simply supporting the Jenny Souris Foundation. Maria, thank you very much for your time this weekend. I hope the day's a big success for the club and you, of course.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Bill.
That's Maria Souris. Joe Thomas is going to stay with us after the break.
Thanks, Maria.
We're going to get some cement.
Let's go in the sheds.
Welcome back to Bulldogs Unleashed, brought to you by Reclaim the Game. And just before I introduce another of our special guests today, just letting you know that website to get in touch with the Jenny Souris Foundation is jsf.org.au if you want to get involved in what is a wonderful game day presentation. Well, there's been a lot of wonderful game day presentations from this bloke right here, David Cement Gillespie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks,
It's
Bill.
good to have you on board,
here,
mate. And now we can talk footy, and I want to get your thoughts, both of you, on the team so far this season. It's been up and down, but then it's been that way for a lot of clubs this year. It's an interesting season.
It's pretty a closest season for a long time, and the last 3 or 4 years, I suppose, with the Dogs, they got away to a not so good start, but they got a couple of wins up this season, and they're showing a bit of fight, and that's what you want,
Even though there have been some losses too, and a couple of big ones, there's a different look about the side, Joe, isn't there?
There is, and I think Cameron's got them competing, I think, a lot more than what they have been in previous years. The big thing that they're sort of lacking at the moment is consistency, and I think that's because they're a young team and they're still developing in their own sort of positions. Like you've got Burton at halfback and new kids coming into the side, Max King and Preston's, who's been so impressive over the first 9 to 10 rounds. And then you've got a lot of other young kids that have been thrown into the game. It's pretty hard to sort of keep the consistency, even though they've all been playing pretty well. The consistency is what's been lacking, I think, in the games that they've lost. So I'm quite happy with the way they're going. The big thing for me is their competitiveness, and they're showing a lot of it at the moment.
And there's a lot of glimpses, if not more than that, of the talent we've got now and the capability, Cement. Do you feel like, well, we've seen it in periods of games when they've clicked.
Yeah, no, and for me, they're showing a bit of fight. In years gone by, they'd put 30 on them, but, they're coming back and they're in the game, there's been a couple of blowouts, as Joe said, but it's, it's a work in progress for them. It's, it just doesn't come overnight. got to be a bit patient and, hopefully, by the end of the year and getting into next year when they're been together for a year, that we see the fruits.
And on Cameron Ciraldo, I said in the earlier segment with Luke Goodwin, he certainly doesn't treat the fans like mugs. He was very open and honest about the way he thought the team played last weekend. We see other coaches do that too, but how do you feel about that? Coaches need to publicly explain a loss, but they also have to be very careful what they say, don't they? If you go on about it too much, it can create a problem.
Well, it's different eras, when we were playing, they used to tell you by name. Up the arse if you're not playing that well. It's a different game, different eras. It was refreshing. Cameron came out and said what he thought, and most of them do, but it's a different. The media can portray it differently sometimes, and he's only saying what he's seeing out there, so that's all you want.
You can't back away from it, Joe, can you?
No, I think he's been very fair in the way he's done things. I've applauded him. Every post-match interview he's had has been, I think, tremendous. Like, he's really laid out the factors that cost them the game or won them the game, and I think a lot of the players are all well aware. The big thing for me is that they're now more aware of it than he is. They're sort of like, you see Reid Marnie saying that he's, we didn't perform in this area, our efforts weren't good in this area, and I think that's the most important thing, that they're starting to recognise areas that they're not improving in, and they're working on that week to week. And look, there is consistency in the fact that they're working in a competitive manner. Like the other day, there was Lomax took an intercept and he ran 70 yards, and we had 5 guys behind him chasing. That wouldn't have happened in years gone by. And then Lomax had to throw the ball to the winger, who scored in the corner, and it was just things like that. They're competing in little events that matter really in the game, and it was a bit disappointing last week. I thought they didn't look like they were ready last weekend, and yet they only got beat by 4 points, and they weren't in the game really. But they're the sort of things we've got to sort of come to terms with and try and put on the back burner as our past, and try and build a club that's competitive in everything we do.
You've both played in some of the greatest Bulldogs teams we've had, and we'll talk about that a little later in the program. But when things aren't going well, how do you maintain belief in the dressing room? How do you stop self-doubt, negativity? How does that work as a player?
Oh, that's a hard one to put that into perspective. You just got to stick together. And it's bonding and chemistry within sides. Everyone's not going to get on with each other at some stages, but you got to believe in it. You got to believe in the system, and and there's going to be some rough games. You're not going to win, and a couple of rough seasons here and there, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, and that for me was what was going on in the boardroom or what was going on anywhere else didn't matter, as long as we all got on and we were sticking together. That's what mattered, and
that's an interesting theme that's come up in the shows we've done this year too, is there's been a lot of talk, not so much about the talk, but about the work. The work that's put in is far more important than what you can kid yourself for a little while, but if you haven't done it, you can't produce.
Yeah, well, look, I think this side has put the work in. I really do. You can see by the way they're playing. It's going to take us a couple of more years, I think, but I think we're on the right track. We've got some good kids coming through. They're going to need a bit more time in first grade and a bit more work to be done with them. But I think overall the base of what we're building is getting there. We've struggled we've been moving in the halfback position. We've been struggling to find someone to put there. They've put Matt Burton there now. I think he's sort of getting his hands on the ball a bit more. He's still trying to get used to that position himself. So there's a lot of initiations or new things that are happening. And the best thing, as Cement said, to stick together in these times and try and work through these periods. And I think that you come out the other end a lot better.
Yeah, I think you're right, Joe. And I think with Burton, he's going to be a great player. And, but he's a country kid. He's a bit shy, like all little country boys when they come down, and he probably hasn't that leadership role, that take it on. But he'll, the next year or two, he'll get that and he'll get his head around it. So it's pretty hard, when you're the main player and you're got the reins and you're running the side. And I don't think he's going to get there in the next year or two. He'll thrive on that. But it's just, he's just wants to get out there and play,
And that's right. Even though that was part of the deal when he came here, he's just come from a team where you got Cleary and Luai at the scrum base, and that's a state of origin combination right there. So it's a big role he's taking on. But given all that, 2 wins separate the top 9 clubs in the comp after 10 rounds, and 3rd to 9th are on 12 points. Every one of those teams. I can't recall after 10 rounds the comp being that close for a long time.
No, I can't either. And they're still in with a shot of getting into the 8, And,
they're not that far off.
And the thing about it is, as I said, the last 3 or 4 years they were, more or less out of it after the round 10. But they've won a couple of games and they've put their noses in with a bit of a sniff to get into the 8, and they can only build on that.
Is there much ladder watching going on in the dressing rooms? I mean, we've won the comp as a club from all kinds of positions over the years. We've had dominant minor premierships. We've also had wins from lower on the ladder. And we'll talk a bit more about that history later. But how much ladder watching goes on?
I don't know.
Do you really take it a game at a time?
It's hard to do it these days because the ladder changes pretty quickly, from the top 8, from that bottom half of the 8 and the top side's just under it. There's 2 points separated them, So I don't know if they watched it too much, but
if you put 2 or 3 games back to back, you're virtually putting yourself back in the picture, basically, the way the comps at the moment. And there are a lot of sides that aren't. Like Parramatta weren't playing well, and now all of a sudden, they put 3 games back to back, and they're up there. And
Raiders have done the same.
Raiders have done the same thing, and it's just funny how the whole situation's working. Like the form team for me at the moment's the Rabbits, Souths. Like they're playing well, and so are the Dolphins. Like what Wayne Bennett's done with that team is amazing, really, putting all those guys together. But it's we've got a way to go, and we've just got to work towards. Everyone's got to work towards building the club from the ground up, basically.
State of Origin is going to be interesting this year. I'm not talking about that competition, but the effect it's going to have on the NRL. I don't know. It depends on how much each club contributes, of course. But if you're looking at the usual suspects from previous years, then it may have a greater impact than we've seen before because, a lot of those top clubs don't have much of a cushion at the top of the ladder that they might have had in recent years.
No, it's pretty congested up there, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. But it may go the same way.
Well, there's a chance for it to sneak up and get a couple of wins.
Yeah.
So when they're out, so the Broncos are obviously going to be impacted, and South's going to have a few in there obviously too. So there's a chance to sneak up and get a few wins.
You reckon 2 seasons before we can win a comp in a position to win? That's what you're referring to, or making the 8?
More about making the 8 and being more consistent. I think consistency is the most important thing when you need to be a premiership threat, and I don't think we've got the consistency at the moment, just not quite. But I think with the players we're building behind the scenes with our recruitment, our development programs, which Gus has set up fantastically. And I think he's done a tremendous job in getting all that sorted, a lot quicker than what we could have done it in years gone by. But it's getting to that stage and then moving forward with that, with your Burtons and your Prestons and Maxi Kings and all those sort of guys, Ray Fatula Mariner, all those sort of guys tend to, we can be like, I thought they played well against St George. We had a lot of guys out that day, and we still played well to come away with a win, albeit by 2 points. But they're the sort of events that we sort of are working towards. And I think, I'd say within next year and the year after, it'll probably be a lot better than what we're doing this year. Yeah.
Cement, you must be pretty proud of those forwards because we've got a lot of meat sitting on the bench week to week and expensive talent as well. But, some of those guys, they've gone out there. They're not overly big players either, even for this day and age, and they've done pretty well.
They're going well, mate. And, the injuries have kind of cruelled us, in the first 6 weeks. I don't know of any club that's had them kind of injuries. with quality players.
With middle players too.
Yeah, middle players.
Yeah.
So, they've done a great job, especially Preston's. He's stood out. He's playing well. And
is it funny how now and again a player turns up? I don't know what it is. Maybe we're biased, but you look at a bloke like Jake Preston and say he's a Bulldog. He just looks like some of our great players.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's up to that level yet. But he has that look, doesn't he? Just that commitment.
And you can tell. He wants to be out there. He wants to play. He's competitive. And he's good to watch. He's like a breath of fresh air for him. So, he's really going good. Yeah, but they're holding their own. In the forwards, it's hard when they're coming off a couple of rough years, and they've got to build that. It'll build into them, and as they get more, used to each other, so it's coming. It's around the corner. It's coming. They're knocking on the door.
They certainly are knocking on the door. We're going to knock on some old doors when we come back. Bulldogs Unleashed, and the Bulldogs we're unleashing this week are Joe Thomas and David Cement Gillespie. Welcome back to Bulldogs Unleashed, brought to you by Reclaim the Game. Time to take a walk down memory lane with Cement Gillespie and Joey Thomas. Cement, you came from Narromine in New South Wales. We talked earlier about country kids being a little bit shy. Were you, and how did you get into the Dogs?
I was a bit shy. I'd only probably been down to Sydney 2 times or 3 times. When I come down when I was 17 or just turned 18. So I was just living around the corner, actually, in Belmore here.
Yeah.
One of the ladies, actually, her son played for Canterbury, Wayne Clay, and she took me in as a boarder. And but I was homesick. I did want to go home on a few occasions, but I was lucky. I had there was a few bush boys here that were playing at the time. One from Narromine, actually, where I'm from, Johnny Coveney.
Oh, Johnny's a great player. Yeah.
Johnny's from Narromine and was friends with my dad, and so he kind of took me under his wing a bit early, and he was a pretty good trainer. Johnny loved his training, and took me under his wing and up to Belmore. Canterbury Leagues Club, up into the gym a fair bit with him, and and all the Mortimer boys and bush boys, so they could probably tell when you're getting a bit homesick and give you a bit of a cuddle when you needed it.
First grade debut in 1984, which was a premiership year, but you weren't directly involved in that, weren't you? But you came off the bench a few times. Tell us about that. Yeah,
I did. I come down in 83, was my first year, and 84 was when the first year I got picked. It was towards the end of the season, and so I'd come off the bench a couple of times in 84, and I remember the grand final. Warren put me out there with 5 minutes to go, and it was more or less to say, well, this is what it's like, mate, get a taste.
And what was it like?
And it was. It was just unbelievable to go out there. I was never going to get on in that game, but he put me out on the sideline for the last 5 or 10, 5 minutes just to give me a bit of a sniff and see what it was like. And this is, if you train hard and do what you got to do, this is where you can end up playing in these games. So it was good.
What was it like? Because that was an intense game, as we all know. It was very, very close. And, of course, Parramatta had been so dominant in the comp for years preceding that. So how did it feel to you sitting on the sideline? Did you ever think we had it? When until the final whistle?
Well, a lot of them games you never thought you had it till the whistle went. They were pretty close games. Yeah. And I think Darryl Brayman laid on a try, I think, for Peter Mortimer, I think. But mate, them games, they were just slogs. You never really thought you had it till the bell went. We're pretty close.
They were a tough pack of forwards. I'll get onto that in more detail in a minute. But Joey, what were you doing in 1984? I mean, you started with Souths, of course.
Yeah. I was playing first grade at Souths in those days under Ron Willey. He was the coach, and we used to have a lot of good battles with Canterbury over those periods, and it was enjoyable because the 2 forward packs were pretty lethal. They'd pretty dynamic players in relation to, they could create things, and they could also put you in a lot of trouble, put you to sleep basically if you didn't look after yourself. It was a good era, that era. I think the early 80s. It was very competitive. Souths were just rebuilding very much the same way as what Canterbury are doing at the moment, and they were in a rebuild situation, whereas Canterbury had just they'd been in a grand final in 1980, and then they sort of rebuilt into the 83-84 season, and they went and bought Warren Ryan, and it just took off.
And within a few years, that was a massive transformation. Went from the entertainers to the enforcers, although the enforcers wasn't an official term. But, as a fan, I had people coming up to me 3 years after the entertainers and saying, oh, your club's ruining the game, it's boring, 4-2 grand final or whatever. And, mate, a win's a win.
Win's a win. And, obviously it come through Warren, with his defensive appetite for the game. And, they were low-scoring games, but they were close and they were contests. And they were slogs and they went down to the wire. And, it's a bit different now. The game's played a bit differently. But, you knew you were in a game. And any of them games, like Joe said, with Souths, you knew you were in for a side. Balmain with Blocker and, and all them, they were pretty, some of them games, in the St George Grand Final, 7-6.
Yeah.
Could have went either way at the end of the day, but we were lucky enough to come out on top. So
now, 85, of course, was interesting for you because you obviously came along a lot more and developed as a player. And what a school, as you say, some great forwards you played with and against. It almost came off the rails, though. You got dropped in the finals, didn't you, at one stage? But
yeah, I did. I come on the scene in 85 and played a fair bit of first grade leading into the semis. And we were playing St George and we got towed up pretty good. And I think it was 26-6 or 0 or something. They beat us. And I got dropped for the next game. And the next game was against Parramatta. And we towed them up, was the vice versa. And I scored a try in that game. But it wasn't enough to get me back in the side, the start run-on side for the 85 grand final. I come off the bench. So, that's, you can either let that get to you or say, well, bugger that, I'll show you, I'll get back. I'll fight my way back. So there's two ways to look at it. You get pissed off and say, well, or you train harder and do what you were supposed to be doing and get back in and get into it again. So, but Warren was playing, we had a very good pack.
Yeah.
Brian Batiste was playing back in that pack. And
that was a tough pack.
Langmack and Kell and Folksy, obviously. Tunks.
Yeah.
And then you had a lot of good players coming up underneath you too. Biting at your heels too. So it was very competitive. And they'd put a fairly strong side together in first grade and reserve, and all grades. Yeah.
Tell us about you joining the Bulldogs, Joe.
I just want to make another point, if I could,
Yeah.
Bill. And it was relentless in the back line too, because they had Andrew Farrer, Chris Mortimer, who were just ruthless. I think Andrew's one of the dirtiest players I've ever seen. Like he was
good with an elbow, Andrew. Very lethal with the elbow.
He was ruthless.
No, they weren't elbows, Bill. They were forearms.
Forearms,
not elbows.
But it didn't stop with their forward pack. It kept on. You had probably one of the best players that played for the club, or the two. You had Steve Mortimer and Terry Lamb, and it was a well orchestrated purchase for all these guys, and the way they fit in together to win 2 comps, and you played in 3 grand finals, didn't you? So,
yeah.
It was just a really well laid out plan, I think.
And of course, we're talking about grand finals leading up to 86, but a lot of the other games weren't that low scoring. They were intense, and there was certainly a defensive mindset, but there is still a lot of, try scoring going on, as you say. So let's get to your decision to join the Dogs. What was that? What was behind that?
Well, I played with Phil Gould at Souths in 86, and I think Gus came to Canterbury in 87 and coached the reserve grade side. And he asked me if I'd be interested in coming across. I said I'd love to, and Bullfrog picked me up in a limo at the front of Cadbury Schweppes.
Did you get a limo from Narromine?
Never got a limo.
Yeah.
No,
and we went around the block, and he started preaching to me the Bulldog message, and then he said, "This is what we do here. This is how we do things." And no mucking around. He started giving me the law of the land, and he said, "Now I'll have a paper here. I've got a paper here for you to sign, and if you sign it today, we welcome you to the Bulldogs." And that's how I came across. It was basically Gus actually asked me to come across. He actually he said, "I'll play you 5'8" or lock wherever," because that's what I was when I originally was at Souths. And he said, "I want to move you to hooker at some stage." And
how'd you feel about that?
Well, I thought I could play hooker because I was probably one of the first hookers to move from 5'8" to hooker, other than Steve Walters, I think, came after me because he
That's right. Yeah.
He would have been second. I think he was playing second row, Steve, when I was playing hooker. So so I was probably one of the first guys to move from 5'8" to half. I was a very slow 5'8".
Yeah, I was going to say that you weren't the quickest 5'8" runner. Here.
No, I was very had
Suited-
very good
suited
hands,
hooker.
very good hands. But and that's how I came across to Canterbury, and I fitted in really well here. Well, I was a bit shy the first time I walked in because I didn't know anyone, because Cement and all that were all overseas, and Paul Dunn, they were all overseas in the Australian squad, I think. Were you away? I think you were away.
Yeah, 86.
Oh, I wanted an off season in England.
Ah,
Well,
right.
yeah,
yeah.
you guys went around, and then it was a bit hard to sort of fit in, but once I fitted in, it was great. Yeah.
Actually, 86, you would have played on the Kangaroos tour, but you lost your finger at work.
Yeah, I had a work accident, and it was on the last. It was actually on the last comp game. We played St George here at Belmore, and we're playing in a Monday night game.
Yeah, you missed the grand final.
And I had a work accident on the Monday morning, so that kind of ruled me out of the grand final and the Kangaroo Tour in '86. So yeah, that wasn't too good, mate. But
Would have been the difference if we had you in 86. We would have won that grand final.
oh,
You can say that.
well, I can. Mate, I would have loved to have been there because I was having a good year in '86. It was kind of breakout year for me. I'd played in the 3 Origins. Me and Terry Lamb, we were on the bench, but we played in the 3 and we won 3-0. So if you win the Origin Series 3-0 and you go on to make a grand final, you're nearly sure you're going to go on the Kangaroo Tour at the end of the year. So, it happened late in the season, the last comp game, and so I missed all that, which, but that things happen, you move on.
I guess maybe that's one of the reasons why they don't let players have jobs now.
That's right.
It's because those things can happen, I suppose. And look, it all came together after that. You missed a few games in '87 due to suspensions too. Was that fair?
Yeah, I got sent off a couple of times in '87.
Yeah,
I think twice.
What was that? Because you missed '86 too, or you're just angry?
Just angry. Oh, probably angry. No, I got sent off here at Belmont, both against Balmain.
Oh.
First round and second round.
Well, that was brewing, wasn't it? Because '88, of course, is when that really came together. So was that a big rivalry developing at that stage?
Oh, yeah,
Could you
it was.
see that unfolding?
Yeah, for sure. They were a pretty aggressive sort of pack. They had an aggressive side, the same as us. So they wanted to make that, make their mark. We wanted to make ours. So yeah, it was you could see it colliding towards there. So they were always good games against the Tigers. Yeah,
Especially with Warren going to Balmain.
and Warren was he went from here to Balmain, so he was in charge then. So
Master and the pupil. It was.
Yeah, you're correct.
Well, that brings us to '88, of course, an amazing season. As you said, Gus becomes first grade coach in '88, and that was a really weird situation. Obviously, he was very young. How long had he coached reserve grade before he got
1
that
year?
gig? 1 year, yeah.
87, I think he had.
Yeah. So what was it like? You're an established player. Well, you both are, but you've not long with the Dogs, but you've been there for a while and you've been under Wack. You've seen the different levels of success. So what was it like with Gus coming in?
He actually played with Gus,
Yeah, of
when
course.
he first got here. So he was only young then, but, he was coaching then. You didn't know he was coaching,
Yeah.
So,
I can even tell in post-match interviews as a player, he had that way of
he had that
explaining
aura.
a game
Yeah.
that you felt like he was that kind of guy. He was the thinking.
Yeah,
forward.
and we all respected Gus, and we were a couple of years older, and obviously he's a young coach, first-year coach. But we all got on good, and he knew how to push our buttons when we needed a bit of a kick up the backside, and when we didn't, he knew what we were like, and so it was just a really good combination there, and there was a turning point in that year. I think it was towards the end of the year, and Canberra were on fire that year, or leading into the semis. This is it's about 3 weeks out from the semis, and we had to go up and play Canberra at Seaford Oval.
And they were building to something really good too.
And they were wiping sides. And Gus said, well, this is going to tell us where we're at. If we can go up there and get them there, this is going to be a big step to where we're going to go.
Yeah.
So we went up there and we beat them. But the process in going up there was he hired a minibus. He drove it.
I think Langers tells this story.
Yeah, we went up there the day before. And them days you used to get the bus on the day.
Yeah,
You go up and play the day on the bus and come home. But he could see something brewing and he wanted to get us together. And so he hired the bus, 20-seater bus. He drove it and off we go the day before. And we stayed up there the night and we beat them, and we beat them pretty convincingly, and that kind of give us that bit of edge. I think that bit of a, we can do this. You know, I mean, we
We
come up.
were down 12-0 after 10 minutes,
Yeah,
weren't we?
and we only beat them 26-12 or something. You know, and that game 3 weeks out from the semis, we were building. You know, and that just gave us a bit more confidence and
That was a catalyst, wasn't it? Really,
Yeah.
because it really made everyone think that we could win it.
it was only a small little thing that,
Yeah,
but it was a big thing.
Yeah.
Because we bonded. We had a good time up there on the bus, and we had a better time coming back. Believe me.
yeah.
You know, and it just got everyone together. You know, and it was
And that's confidence.
Yeah.
That built the confidence for everyone to know that we can do it. You know what I mean? And I think in every grand final win, there's a catalyst or a game that signals, yes, we can win the comp. And I think every club experiences it. I can remember Trent Robinson talking about the Roosters when they first won their comp under him, and he said, "We knew after round 7 or 8 that we could win the comp." You know what I mean? That's a bit early, but there's somewhere 4 or 5 weeks out before the semis come. You can see a side that's ready to do it. You know, someone's going to come out of the ground. I think Canterbury did it in '95, did they?
well,
Yep.
they did, and I played
From
against
a long
them.
way back. Well, we'll talk about that, a little later, because unfortunately he'd left the club by then. He was on the other side, but it could have won even more. But he did win one with Manly. We'll get to that. I'm still curious because the 80s was a fantastic period for the club, obviously. Hasn't really been equalled as a decade. But it's interesting, as we said, you go from the entertainers to the enforcers. 88 was kind of a bit of both, wasn't it? There was a lot of, even you guys, you threw a pass for Joey to score. I think Steve O'Brien made the break from might have been a clearing kick. But anyway, you backed up and threw a pass for Joey to score in a major semi against Cronulla. There was a lot of talent across the board in terms of not just physicality, but being able to pass and catch, position yourselves. It was a very talented team.
It was. The game was changing a bit too. You know, we had a pretty good attacking side. You know, we had Paul Dunn, who could pop balls left, right, and centre, and Tunksy, and you know, it was a good mixture. Joe was hooker. It was a good hitter. Had myself and Folksy in the second row, and Langmack could even
use the ball.
You could use the ball. So it was and you had Tony Curry and Andrew Farrer in the centres, who there wasn't too many getting over them.
Like he was a 13 playing 13 in '88. Basically, what today's 13s are.
Yeah.
Langmack, because he was a big body, and you could.
Balmain supporters are not going to like this, but that '88 grand final, you know, and it got down to Barr and Ellery. You know, and Ellery changed when Ellery went off. Now, who knows? I personally, I don't think it would have, because I think Andrew Farrer and Tony Curry were the two defensive best centres in the comp.
Yeah.
And not too many got around them.
Yep.
You know, but it was a big loss for him. Obviously, he's a great player, Ellery.
Yeah.
But I just think that, you know, we had them covered out with them two out there anyway.
And they'd had a hard road
They'd had a hard
to that
road.
grand final.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you play all those games, sudden death, it's a bridge too far.
Or just getting there is enough sometimes.
Their year was the next year, and they blew it. Well, I don't mean that in a nasty way, but they played a very good side the next year too in Canberra. But that was their probably better opportunity to win a grand final. And it was next year. But nevertheless, you stole a try off a winger in a grand final. What was happening there? I spoke to Robin Thorne, by the way, about a year ago in a function, and I asked him if he had any bitterness towards you for it, but he was okay with it. But
Actually, Joe only scored the tackle before it. He was over the line. They pulled him back by the scruff of the neck.
That's right.
And then I think might have been Folksy or Langmack or Tunksy just flicked one out the side. And then I think it was Folksy onto me, and I had about that much to work for. But I'd never seen Robin. I know he's dirty on me. But I was
You might have pushed him over the sideline.
Get away! This is mine.
He's only a winger.
Robin. No, he's but you know, in them type of situations, you've got to be in the right place at the right time. And you know, I was in the right place at the right time there. I just had to dive over. But that kind of try gave us a bit of a buffer in that game. It was about, I think, 10 or 15 minutes into the second half. You know, and it kind of just gave us a bit of a spur and a bit of a buffer. So, and it
broke the game, basically.
Yeah, just to score a try in a grand final was a dream for me, yeah.
How did that rate among the grand final winning teams you've been in?
Oh, listen, your first one, I was younger, you know, I was only 19, 20 in the 85 when we won it. And, it was just a bit of a ride then, and it was great. And it's what you want to do as a kid. Growing up, you want to play in them games. That's why you play the game, to play in them type of games. And so it was a dream come true. But '88, I felt more a part of it. I'd been here for a couple of years, and not that I had a senior role there, but there was a lot of senior blokes there that had been there for a long time. But I was more accustomed to it, and I was felt like I was part of the furniture a bit more. And it was great, and we had a really good side. Everyone got on. It was just a great ride that year.
There was a lot of experience in the side when you think about it.
Well, Turvey come off the bench. It was Turvey's last year.
That's right. Yeah.
Mick Hagan had a great year that year, and Glenn Nissen. Come from nowhere.
You had a big year. Robbie Thorne had a big
Robbie
year.
Thorne had a great year. Jason Ouchin,
he was a good
he was
player,
safe, and it was just a good blend, and the chemistry was there. Everyone got on. It was great. It was a great year.
Must have made that limousine ride feel good.
Yeah, it was tremendous. I still pinch myself every year around grand final day because I've been in one. You know what I mean? And it's a great thing to have as a memory. Because it keeps getting reinvigorated every year. You know what I mean? And to fall into a pack that I fell into at Canterbury, you had every one of them played for Australia. You had Tunksy, Dunny, Cement, Folksy, Langmack were all Australian Test players. And had been in grand finals, so there was no slouches in the side. Then you had Michael Hagan as our halfback. Terry Lamb was a 5'8". They've all did Hagues play for Australia? Or he played State of Origin.
They played State of Origin.
But it was a pretty good side when you look at the names that were in the team. And I was very fortunate to be in the right spot at the right time with the right crowd, and it was great basically.
You both went to West in '91. What happened there? Was it just time for a change? How does that work?
For me, I'm only speaking on my behalf. When you retire, and I'm 59 now, and you sit back and say, "Oh, should I have left or not, or should I have stayed?" But back when it happened, I was probably due for a bit of a change. I was probably getting a bit stale, and I think a change when you go to another club, you got to prove yourself again. So it's like you're starting over again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you've got to prove yourself to the your new teammates you're playing with, their supporters. I had a couple of offers to leave, but chose West obviously because Joe was going, Warren was the coach, and I had a good relationship with Warren and Langers and Andrew. It kind of was a new lease of life for me. That's the way I look at it.
It must have helped going together, I suppose. That doesn't often happen, especially these days.
No, it doesn't.
No. Well, we were fortunate because I think Warren was the catalyst behind everyone moving. Because I definitely wanted to play under Warren Ryan because I'd heard so much about him when I was here as a Canterbury player and how good a coach he was. And he was a very good coach. Was he as good as Gus? I would say I think Gus was a better man manager, better motivator. Warren was very theoretical. He was very on the
clinical.
Clinical, yeah. As to
everything had to be done. The salt and pepper shakers out.
Structure, yeah.
So, as far back as the early '80s, mid-'80s, I'd ring Warren up for an interview on radio, for example. And if he had the time, we'd finish up talking for half an hour. We'd do the interview in 5 minutes, but then we'd just talk footy because he loved to talk footy and he was happy to educate me, which I thought was very nice of him.
We had lunch with Warren last week.
Yeah.
And a few Balmain boys come and
that's great.
A few Newcastle, Joey Johns. Yeah. And but mate, he's very respected. The blokes that know the game will still ring Warren.
Yeah.
And get his, what do you still ringing to this day.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that at all. I think he might pop up in one of Langer's Yesterday's Heroes segments too, which I'm really looking forward to. I have to ask before I let you guys go, particularly you, Cement, you went in the end of your career to a team that you hated as a kid, but I'll tell you what, that was a pretty good ride too, although it must have been really weird playing against the Bulldogs in a grand final in '95 for Manly. And I don't know, how did that feel? We don't need to go into great detail about it because you did win the comp the next year, which is nice.
We made 3 in a row. 95, 95, 96, 97. Now, 95, Canterbury were coming on a run. You know,
Yeah, that was
when they were coming on a
extraordinary,
run, and I'm thinking to myself, here we go.
Well, you of all people would have known how dangerous.
Well, I did.
Yeah, because you'd only lost 2 games in the minor
we were the best side in the comp by far. Yeah, not by far, but that year we were averaging about 10 points scored against us, which is unheard of. You know, and but in that game we were never in the hunt. In that particular game, that grand final day, we were never in the hunt, and credit to them. You know, they come through and they had a lot of momentum and a lot of belief, and they come down and pull our pants down in that game. Yeah. And, you know, it still hurts, you know. We were lucky enough to come out and win it the next year in 96, beat St George. And then 97 was my last year. I retired in 97, Newcastle, that famous last try in the last 16 seconds. So, mate, in my career, I've been lucky enough to play in winning grand finals and losing ones. Now, some players don't even get to play in a grand final. You know, and you talk to blokes that play for Australia, and they say, "Well, I'd give 3 tests away to play in a grand final." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's
sure.
That's it. That's the bond, and that's, you know, we still get together now, you know, and talk about it, and that's what it's all about. But yeah, that Canterbury side in '95, they were coming from the clouds, and they were coming in with a bit of momentum.
One of the things about Bulldogs clubs, particularly in that period, was that you just looked at the players they had on the field, and if they got to the finals in any way, no matter what happened to them during the season, the other teams would be looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, true. I think in 97 or 98 when they made the grand final?
98.
98.
Yeah.
I went to the game to watch Canterbury and Parramatta, and Canterbury were down 18-2 or something. They were getting flogged by Parramatta.
That was
and
the big run.
We actually left, Cement and I left the ground. We thought, we'll just go home. They're not going to win this. Anyway, we heard someone scored a try in the corner, and Halligan's kicked the goal from the sideline. And then it was 18-8, and then all of a sudden we've turned the rate. They won the game. And we'd actually left thinking they're going to get beat. And they were unfortunate in the grand final because they played Brisbane, didn't they?
Canberra.
Very good side.
Very good side, Canberra.
Very good side.
Mal cleaned up Bar
Yeah, Mal was unstoppable in that game.
And Bar done the same. So these things happen in games, and, you know, people, you know, relive it and this, that and the other, but, you know, it's you don't go out to intentionally do them things. They, you know, it happens, and you know, move on, and that's it.
You guys played under some great coaches. And we've talked about Wack and what an influence he had on the game. But I suppose when you look back, I guess you don't realise it at the time, although you did follow him to West, so you're aware of that. But, you know, when you look back, you would have been happy, I think, to have played under the coaches that you had.
I was lucky. I come in. Ted Glossop was coaching him when I first came in, but I didn't play under Ted. I was playing under 23s then. Never got the chance, but I was there to see him work. You know, he was great, and then obviously Warren come in, and Gus on the back of that. And in my representative career, I got coached by Jack Gibson in the 90s in an Origin series, Timmy Sheens, Bozo,
yeah.
Towards the end at Manly.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're all different personalities, different, you know, how they, you know, want to run the show, but great coaches.
Yeah.
You know, and, yeah, it's been a good ride.
Hard to pick a difference. I wouldn't put that on you if you don't want to do it, but hard to pick an outstanding coach when you think of those names. As you say, they're all different, but they're all very effective.
Yeah, they've all got their own personalities. They've got their own. Like Gus was a bit like Warren in a lot of ways, but he was a bit more of a motivator to get you doing what you needed to do. You're always either Warren or Gus.
Warren was very blunt. Sometimes, you know, when his appraisal.
Well, that's the old-fashioned way.
It was the old-fashioned way.
You couldn't do that these days, surely.
Yeah, where Gus had worked, you know, it wasn't his personality. He knew what buttons to push, and he knew, you know, when you need to kick up the arse and when you didn't, and when you need to cuddle.
Yeah.
So he was very different that way. But you know, Warren was, you know, great on the technical side of things, and you know, and plays, and then with Bozo, you know, one of the greatest to play the game, you know, and he was different to all of them again too.
It's not actually common for a a legendary player, an immortal, to actually be a successful coach as well. There haven't been too many.
No, there isn't.
But that's a lot of reputation that they carry into the words that they say.
Yeah, of course. And you got to realise that's what brings blokes to clubs too. You know, and that's in a way it's good. Gus being here, you know, he's in charge here, so you know what you get, and you know he's a proven track record. He's a winner. You mightn't like him, or or you like him, or you don't. He's one of them personalities, but he's a winner.
Yep, there's no doubt. Joe Thomas, David Gillespie, it's been a lot of fun. Hopefully I'll get you back before the end of the season and we'll talk more about rugby league. But in the meantime, these guys are unleashed, so we'll let them go back to their homes.